Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be back.
Today we're plunging into a truly profound and, at times, pretty unsettling set of sources.
Yeah, definitely unsettling.
They unpack these really intricate mechanisms of power and control. We're talking about how deep-seated systems operate, often subtly,
Right.
to shape everything from our economies right down to our very minds.
It's quite a scope.
Yeah, this deep dive is going to challenge some common assumptions, I think. It offers a perspective that's, well, as critical as it is eye-opening.
Absolutely. The aim is really to help you, our listener, grasp the true nature of these forces at play.
Exactly.
And our sources today, they're primarily drawn from the insights of Dr. Amos Wilson.
Right, Dr. Wilson.
He offers this comprehensive framework for understanding what he actually terms European dominance and manipulation.
That's a strong phrase right there.
It is.
Yeah.
And his work suggests that many of the challenges faced by African people are not accidental. They're not just random misfortune, but are in fact functionally necessary for the existing power structures to maintain themselves.
Functionally necessary. Wow.
Yeah. So our mission today is to try and illuminate these hidden designs, these underlying logics.
So you can clearly see the intricate webs of control, maybe.
Precisely. And understand the underlying logic that Dr. Wilson argues governs these relationships.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Dr. Wilson's core concept of power. It's utterly fascinating.
It really is.
The ability to control consequences. It sounds, I don't know, deceptively simple on the surface.
It does, but the implications, as he lays them out, are incredibly far-reaching.
Yeah. How deeply this fundamental control can affect, well, everything. Global economics, individual psychology.
It touches all of it.
So what's the profound insight here? What is it about this definition of power?
Precisely. Power, as defined in these sources, it's fundamentally the ability to control consequences.
Okay.
And it does that by strategically distributing rewards and punishments.
So not just brute force.
No, not just brute force. It's this incredibly subtle, kind of pervasive mechanism shaping reality through incentive, through disincentives.
Yeah.
Think about the historical example he uses, the Opium Wars.
Right, with Britain and China.
Exactly. The British, they were facing this significant trade deficit, these economic issues, because they loved Chinese tea so much. So they leveraged their control over opium supply and, of course, their military might, and they literally imposed new devastating consequences on China.
Consequences like addiction.
Widespread addiction, yeah. Social breakdown, and eventually forced economic concessions.
Wow.
This allowed them, as Dr. Wilson puts it quite starkly, to effectively make other people pay for their mistakes.
Make others pay for their mistakes.
Yeah. It vividly illustrates how a dominant group, like the Europeans in this case, can manipulate these gifts and punishments.
Gifts and punishments, like access to goods or military threat.
Exactly. Whether it's access to vital goods or the threat of military intervention, they use it to shape behavior, redirect economic flows, all to their own benefit. The profound insight here is how this control isn't just external, right? It's designed to engineer internal responses.
So it becomes self-perpetuating.
That's the argument. It becomes a self-perpetuating system.
So if a group can manipulate consequences on that kind of scale, even across nations, how does Dr. Wilson then connect this to what he calls racial creation?
Yeah, that's a very strong term.
It is, and it suggests an even deeper level of control than just, economic dominance.
It absolutely does. This sense control over consequences, he argues, leads directly to what he terms racial creation.
Okay.
When one group controls the vast majority of the world's wealth, its economic and political empires, its military might, they can use this power not just to extract resources,
Right.
but to actively change and transform and create the very character, personality, and behaviors of an oppressed people.
Create their character. Wow.
Yeah, to suit the purposes of the European or the person who is in control. It's like an engineering of identity itself.
Goodness.
China's forced addiction and then the subsequent open markets where their internal economy was just laid bare for external exploitation.
You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, it's presented as this stark, brutal example of this racial creation.
How so?
Well, their society was fundamentally altered, their internal structures deliberately weakened, their people's behaviors redirected, all to serve an external power's economic needs.
Right.
Dr. Wilson argues this shows how an entire population's behavior, even their self-perception, can be strategically engineered to maintain a dominant power's advantage.
Okay. As you listen, maybe consider how this fundamental definition of power, this ability to control consequences and even create behavior, might apply to other areas of life that you experience day to day.
That's a great point.
What stands out to you about this idea, this profound strategic manipulation, not just of resources, but of human identity itself?
Yeah, it's a heavy concept. And moving beyond the sort of overt control, the sources then delve into something maybe even more insidious, more chilling, perhaps.
Wow.
It's the deliberate psychological engineering of the African mind,
Psychological engineering.
resulting in what's described as a hysterical personality.
Hysterical personality.
Yeah, and this isn't presented as some accidental byproduct of oppression, just a side effect of tough conditions.
Right.
Instead, Dr. Wilson argues it's a profound induced insanity
Induced insanity.
that is functionally necessary for maintaining control.
Functionally necessary again.
Yeah. This personality is characterized as being highly impressionable, highly influenceable,
Okay.
making it uniquely susceptible to external manipulation at this really fundamental, almost unconscious level.
That's a powerful and frankly disturbing term, induced insanity.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how Dr. Wilson describes this psychological engineering? What are the deliberate methods, according to the sources, that contribute to this hysterical personality? And how does it actually manifest, day to day in decision-making?
Right. It's crucial to understand the architecture behind it, not just the label, #tag1, lack of enduring history and future sense, social amnesia. Okay, so a key hallmark of this personality, something deeply emphasized in the sources, is having no sense of history, of long history, and of enduring history.
No sense of history.
And this isn't just about, not knowing dates or facts.
Right.
It's presented as a profound, deliberate disconnection from one's past.
Deliberate disconnection.
Yeah, and this creates a really debilitating lack of self-knowledge.
How so?
Well, it means individuals can't truly understand their own motivations or their current behaviors because they're cut off from the historical roots that explain them.
Ah, I see.
Dr. Wilson posits that the past, though forgotten, rules unchallenged.
Rules unchallenged because it's unconscious.
Exactly. It controls current behavior far more effectively precisely because it operates on an unconscious level. It leaves individuals unaware of the forces really shaping their lives.
Okay.
And without a conscious understanding of their historical trajectory, a people can't collectively plan for a future that truly serves their interests.
And this lack of historical grounding then manifests in very practical ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The sources mention things like poor memory or being easily distractible.
Right.
How do these seemingly minor traits become such significant obstacles for, say, collective advancement?
Absolutely. When a people are disconnected from their long history, this manifests in cognitive and behavioral patterns that really hinder collective progress. Things like poor memory and being easily distractible become profound issues because they make it incredibly difficult to concentrate on what's truly important.
Like long-term planning.
Exactly, or any kind of strategic thinking for the group. Imagine trying to build something complex if every few minutes you forget what you were doing or get diverted by something trivial.
Yeah, impossible.
So the sources argue that this social amnesia doesn't actually free people from the burdens of history.
Right.
Instead, it puts us under the negative effect and pathological effects of history.
Okay.
This leads to a life lived in denial of current realities, a constant state of escape from confronting uncomfortable truths about their collective condition.
Denial and escape. How does that play out?
Well, this denial often finds expression through maladaptive behaviors. Things like pervasive drug and alcohol use are mentioned, which serve as a means of literally denying reality and one's deeply impacting history. It creates this vicious cycle of self-sabotage that further entrenches their powerlessness. #2, emotionality, impulse, and wishful thinking. Another critical aspect of this hysterical personality he describes is its profound emotionality.
Emotionality.
Yeah, the sources highlight that it is generally a highly emotional personality defined more by its emotionality than by rationality.
Okay, so emotions dominate reason.
That's the idea. And this isn't just seen as a temperament. Dr. Wilson argues that this emotional dominance directly leads to problems controlling impulses.
Right.
And a high susceptibility to all kinds of addictions.
Addictions again.
Yeah. He even suggests the European system intentionally emotionalizes the African mind.
Intentionally emotionalizes. Why?
As a prelude to his behavioral manipulation. It's presented as a strategic move to bypass rational thought, to prevent critical analysis of their situation.
Make them more pliable.
Exactly. Make individuals more pliable to external influence and control. When decisions are made based on immediate gratification or emotional reactions rather than, reasoned calculation,
Yeah.
a people become easy to manage and exploit. That's the argument.
And connected to this emotionality is what the sources call wishful thinking, where individuals live in a state of unreality.
Right.
This sounds like it would have deeply detrimental effects on problem-solving and collective action. How does Dr. Wilson describe this manifestation?
Well, wishful thinking, in Dr. Wilson's analysis, means individuals are prone to believing mythologies and bizarre things and ideas
Why?
to assuage their anxieties, even to the point of becoming irrational, or, as he puts it, crazy in their beliefs about reality.
So instead of confronting harsh realities?
They retreat into fantasies
Yeah.
instead of developing practical strategies.
And this is contrasted with the dominant group's approach.
Very starkly contrasted with how the masters of this world wrestle with symbols and ideas, using things like mathematics and logic, to objectively control and transform the world to their advantage.
Okay.
So while the oppressed are encouraged, perhaps, to believe in convenient myths, the oppressors are relentlessly applying scientific and logical principles to manipulate and control the physical and social world.
Wow. That's a fundamental difference in engagement with reality.
One group seeks to escape it through fantasy, while the other meticulously dissects and engineers it for power. That's the picture painted. Now, this profound psychological condition, this hysterical personality, it's explicitly presented as not an accident.
Not natural.
Not a naturally occurring phenomenon, no. Dr. Wilson argues that European psychological warfare has systematically and intentionally associated African identity,
Okay.
the black body, black features, with negativity, evil, immorality, sin, and inferiority.
Intentionally associated with negativity.
Yes, this deliberate imposition of negative identity is presented as a cornerstone of oppression, designed to instill this deep-seated self-rejection.
How would that work? Through media? Religion?
Think of how religious narratives, media portrayals, even common linguistic associations might subtly embed these negative ideas over time.
And the sources emphasize that this process is achieved through the Europeans' pervasive control over the definition of reality.
Exactly, and the sheer power of naming.
The power of naming. How does that actually work to create this self-hatred?
Well, it's described as incredibly insidious. For example, Dr. Wilson points to the pervasive statement, "The black man is the symbol of evil,"
Fair.
which he argues pervades European consciousness. This isn't just an isolated idea. It's projected onto African people through various channels: education, media, religious texts, social interactions.
So it gets internalized.
It works its way into their very psyche. Over time, this leads to an internalized belief that to be moral or good or acceptable, one must get rid of the African in one's personality.
Get rid of the African.
Yeah. And this isn't just metaphoric, it's reinforced by cultural and religious narratives, like the echoed sentiments in religious hymns about being washed as white as snow.
Right.
The implication is that blackness itself is something to be cleansed or transcended. It's this powerful internal conflict engineered from the outside.
Turning the individual against their own identity.
That's the core idea. The very core of this induced insanity is alienation.
Alienation meaning.
Meaning, simply put, to be away from the self.
Away from the self.
When one is alienated from their authentic African identity, their collective wealth, their labor, the products of their efforts, none of it can be used for themselves or other African people.
So where does it go?
Instead, these vital resources are unwittingly given to aliens, meaning non-African groups or the dominant system.
Yeah.
This deliberate separation from one's authentic identity is likened to brainwashing.
Brainwashing.
A systematic reprogramming where an emptiness and a vacuum are created within the individual's consciousness.
A vacuum.
Yeah. This void then allows a new alien identity, one defined by the oppressor's values and needs to be sucked in.
Sucked in. To take control.
To take control of the African body and mind, ultimately resulting in a profound loss of self-control and a perpetuation of self-destructive behaviors that, paradoxically, benefit the dominant system. ###4, the implanted spirit and its control. And the sources take this concept of indoctrination even further, conceptualizing it as the implanting of a spirit.
Implanting a spirit.
Or even in more visceral metaphorical terms, demonic possession.
Wow, okay. That's strong language.
It is. This powerful metaphorical language emphasizes the deep, internalized, and often unconscious control exerted by European values and consciousness over African people.
So it's like beyond just learned behaviors.
It suggests a level of subjugation that extends beyond mere learned behaviors to an almost spiritual capture, an internal force driving actions.
And this spirit that has been implanted in us, as Dr. Wolf describes it, it then causes individuals to identify with it,
Yes.
leading them to defend the very system that created their subordinate state.
That's the argument.
That's a truly chilling thought, internalizing the oppressor's mindset to that degree.
It is chilling because it creates this mechanism that ensures everything the black men do benefit the white man.
Even when it looks like they're acting independently.
Even when their actions appear to be independent or self-serving, this spirit compels self-destructive behavior, where aggression is tragically turned inward, leading to the phenomenon of killing each other in order to maintain this system.
Instead of directing it against the oppressors.
Rather than being directed against the external oppressors or the system itself, this means the oppressor is left untouched and unscathed.
Protected by the internal conflicts.
Protected by the very internal conflicts they engineered. Dr. Wilson even suggests that this implanted spirit can incarnate in us.
Incarnate? How?
Influencing our very flesh and sculpt our very bodies.
Goodness.
Highlighting the profound and pervasive nature of this control, suggesting it shapes not just thoughts, but even physical characteristics or expressions, creating this physically manifest reflection of internalized subjugation.
Wow. Okay, we've just explored the deliberate psychological architectures of control. The idea of power as controlling consequences, even engineering identity.
Heavy stuff.
Definitely. Now let's turn our attention to how these profound ideas manifest in the practical, everyday structures of our lives.
Right, the systemic level.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. As Dr. Wilson's analysis reveals how economic systems are designed not just to, extract wealth, but to actively maintain a hierarchy. The sources reveal that even seemingly beneficial developments, like new supermarkets in underserved communities.
Yeah, things that look like progress.
Exactly. Can actually be part of a larger, often hidden, strategy for control and wealth extraction.
Okay, so a prime example of this systemic design for wealth extraction is the strategic discovery by external corporate investors of the immense profitability within inner-city black communities.
Profitability, despite perceptions of poverty.
Exactly. Despite widespread perceptions of poverty that might suggest these areas are economically unviable, Dr. Wilson highlights that these communities possess substantial collective buying power.
Really? Like how much?
Well, he gives concrete examples. Georgia's African-American population, often overlooked, controls approximately 16 cents of every dollar in spending power there.
16 cents on the dollar. That's significant.
It is. And even more astonishingly, New York State is identified as the largest black market in the world.
The largest.
Holding a staggering $61 billion in buying power.
61 billion.
Wow. This immense purchasing power, often unrecognized or underestimated by black people themselves, is meticulously studied and understood by external corporate entities, precisely because of its lucrative potential.
So it's a market ripe for external exploitation.
That's the argument.
So why is this so attractive to external corporations now? Especially when these areas were maybe ignored or stigmatized before. What changed?
Well, the sources explain that corporate retailers have largely saturated suburban markets.
Okay, they've maxed out there.
Pretty much, reaching a point of diminishing returns. So this has led them to aggressively seek new, untapped opportunities for growth.
And the inner city is untapped.
Exactly. The inner city, once viewed condescendingly as a ghetto teeming with squatters and bristling with political upheaval, a place to avoid, is now strategically reevaluated, in cold economic terms, as a city of more than 3 million consumers without a grocery store or other national retail outlets, presenting a veritable land of untapped opportunity for those willing to enter.
It's purely profit-driven then.
The calculations are purely profit-driven, pioneering supermarkets entering these areas. He mentions Pathmark in Newark, Safeway in D.C., Winn-Dixie in Miami, Dominick's in Chicago. They anticipate little competition from existing small businesses and, crucially, they routinely outperform many other suburban stores. They rank high in industry profitability.
Outperform suburban stores.
Yeah. So this isn't charity, right? It's not social uplift.
No.
This demonstrates these markets are hard-headed investment tools for breaking into a surprisingly lucrative market, ensuring that wealth generated within these communities is siphoned off by external corporations. And beyond just consumer markets, Dr. Wilson's analysis also delves into how dominant capitalist forces,
Okay.
often implicitly or explicitly identified in his framework as European or white, exert significant and consistent pressure on governments
Pressure for what?
to reduce their tax burdens and minimize expenditures on social welfare.
Lower taxes, fewer services.
Exactly. They demand lower taxes from states and cities, creating this competitive environment where different places are essentially forced to slash taxes or offer huge incentives to attract businesses.
A race to the bottom, kind of.
Sort of.
Yeah.
This results in tax holidays, some lasting for 10, 15, some for 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, leading to severe financial strain on cities and states. New York City, for instance, is described as broke to a good degree because it has a lot of major capital resources that are not paying taxes at all.
Wow.
This relentless pressure ensures that capital benefits, usually at the expense of public services, leaving less for education, infrastructure, community development.
And this pressure can even lead to public money being used to finance private capitalist ventures.
Yes.
The Mercedes-Benz case in Alabama is mentioned. That example really highlights how public funds can be diverted to private profit.
Indeed. The Mercedes-Benz case is a powerful illustration of Dr. Wilson's argument here.
What happened?
According to the sources, Mercedes-Benz reportedly received a staggering $300 million tax credit
800 million.
and other public funds to build a factory, effectively paying no taxes on their operations for a substantial period.
No taxes at all.
For a long time. The city contributed $30 million for land acquisition. The state added $5 million to grade it and prepare the site.
So the public paid for the land prep too.
Yeah. This expensive acquisition of jobs meant Mercedes-Benz built a $300 million factory without having to pay a cent of its own money.
The public funded the whole factory.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
The entire cost was borne by the public, shifting the burden into taxpayers who then face cuts to essential services like education, healthcare, infrastructure.
Wow.
This demonstrates how capital can use the public money to further its own private end. It's presented as a clear mechanism of exploitation where the public subsidizes private accumulation, further concentrating wealth and power, #3, the free market, deception, and controlled consumption. Now, the sources, in quite stark terms, boldly claim there's no such thing as a free market.
No such thing.
It is, quite provocatively, termed white folks propaganda.
Propaganda. To what end?
Used to force people into their market.
Okay, that's a powerful assertion.
It is. And Dr. Wilson supports it by highlighting historical hypocrisy.
Such as?
While European nations brutally forced open China's markets during the Opium Wars,
Right, we discussed that.
the United States itself maintained a closed economic market from its inception until 1945,
A closed market.
and heavily taxed any outside nation that sought to trade with it.
So hypocrisy.
This selective application of free market principles, advocating them for others while restricting them for oneself, reveals its true function, he argues, as a tool of dominance, a means of controlling access to wealth.
So this creates a kind of double bind for the dominated people.
Exactly.
They're told to operate in a free market, but the rules of that market are rigged against them.
Yeah.
How does this system then control their desires and consumption patterns?
Precisely. The dominated are blocked from accessing external markets, or their access is heavily restricted, while their own internal markets are simultaneously invaded, and wealth is relentlessly suctioned off by alien nations or external corporations. The sources issue this powerful warning against letting other people generate your desires and produce your case.
Don't let others generate your desires. Why?
Because when they do, they are in control of production and thus control your very behavior and economic choices. This resonates deeply with the argument that the European system creates the needs in us to begin with.
Creates the needs.
Through pervasive advertising, cultural influence, promoting certain lifestyles.
Right.
And then profits endlessly from satisfying those very needs, ensuring this cycle of dependence and perpetual extraction. And this manipulation extends deeply into consumerism itself.
Okay.
African people, the sources contend, are driven to conspicuously consume from external systems.
Conspicuous consumption.
And this consumption isn't merely about meeting needs. it's portrayed as a psychological compensation.
Compensation for what?
For feelings of inferiority, often equating consumption of external goods with a false sense of equality or status.
Right.
The paradox, as Dr. Wilson describes it, is that this perceived freedom of choice is utterly illusory.
Illusory? Why?
Because what you want to do has also been artificially implanted in your mind.
Ah, the created needs again.
Exactly. This creates a state of pathological normalcy.
Pathological normalcy.
As the sources put it, when we behave normally, we work against our very best interest as a people.
Wow.
Unwittingly funneling wealth and power away from their own communities and into the hands of the dominant system that created these desires in the first place.
This brings us to a really crucial point about economic potential, doesn't it?
Yes.
The sources argue that the economic power of African people is immense, but often tragically unrecognized and misdirected by themselves. Can you elaborate on the scale of this untapped power?
Absolutely. The figures Dr. Wilson presents are quite striking.
Like?
African Americans, for example, control approximately 16 cents of every dollar in spending power in Georgia, illustrating a significant local economic impact.
16 cents. Yeah, you mentioned that.
And in New York State, they represent the largest black market in the world, valued at that staggering $61 billion annually.
61 billion. Huge.
Nationally, African Americans earn over $300 billion each year.
300 billion.
Implying a potential production value well over $1 trillion if that income were effectively leveraged and circulated within their own communities.
$1 trillion potential.
Yeah. This vast buying power is explicitly identified as the difference between their white business's success and their failure.
So black spending props up external businesses.
It's presented as a powerful, often unacknowledged economic lever.
Okay. Despite this formidable economic leverage, then, Dr. Wilson observes that African people suffer from profound social disorganization
Yes.
and economic dependence. Why?
Well, he argues they are primarily educated to consume rather than produce.
Educated to consume.
A fundamental flaw, he says, in their economic orientation. They own virtually no businesses.
Right.
And administer nothing belonging to yourself, meaning they lack control over the means of production, distribution, even their own community's economic infrastructure.
Okay.
This leads to a massive and continuous wealth drain,
Wealth drain.
as immense black buying power is consistently siphoned off by external groups who dominate internal black markets.
You mentioned Harlem earlier.
Exactly. The example where 95% of customers on 125th Street in Harlem are black, yet there are approaching 70 Korean businesses and very few black-owned ones.
Yeah.
This vividly illustrates precisely how black wealth flows out to finance your enemies, as he puts it, rather than strengthening their own communities, perpetuating economic subjugation.
Okay, we've explored the economic mechanisms of control. Now, let's consider how these dynamics play out in a system that's supposed to be fair and impartial. The justice system.
Right.
The sources, they really don't pull any punches here.
Not at all.
It's presented not as a neutral arbiter, but as a deliberate and powerful instrument of control. Designed to maintain the existing hierarchy, what's the core argument about its function?
Dr. Wilson argues that the justice system, much like the health system he also critiques, operates with a reversed function for African people.
Reverse function? How?
It will met out injustice precisely to maintain the European empowerment.
Met out injustice to maintain power.
Yeah. Its true functional role, according to his analysis, is to serve the interests of the dominant group, not to provide genuine justice or protection for black people.
Okay.
He contends that laws are written by our enemies and enforced by our enemies.
Right.
And crucially, offer no real protection for African interests.
Of real protection.
The stark implication is that if Europeans face a choice between their own survival, for example, feeding his child, or securing their group's future, and the well-being of African people, no civil laws, constitutions, or anything else is going to keep him from feeding his first.
Wow. That's bleak.
It's a system designed fundamentally, he argues, for the self-preservation and advancement of the dominant group, regardless of abstract notions of justice. #2, criminalization and incarceration as control mechanisms.
Given that framework, then, the system actively criminalizing black men and leading to alarmingly high incarceration rates appears to be, well, a deliberate strategy rather than a failing.
That's how it's presented.
How does Dr. Wilson elaborate on this as a control mechanism?
It is presented as a very deliberate strategy, particularly when black males are no longer seen as economically useful to the dominant system.
When they're not useful.
Once their labor or consumption value diminishes, Dr. Wilson suggests they are warehoused in the jails and prisons.
Warehoused.
This isn't just about punishment, you see. It's about control and elimination from the productive economy.
Okay.
Furthermore, the narrative of black-on-black violence is then strategically used to frighten white folk in electing presidents and other national and state officers.
Using fear for political gain.
This narrative shifts blame from systemic issues onto the black community itself, creating a public justification for further state control, increased policing, more punitive measures, all while distracting from the underlying systemic causes of crime and poverty within these communities. It serves to maintain a climate of fear that benefits the dominant political structure. Hashtag 3. Self-hatred channeled inward. Black-on-black violence. And critically, the system leverages and exploits that internalized self-hatred within the black community.
The self-hatred we talked about earlier.
Exactly, which was presented as a product of psychological engineering, aggression and hostility instead of being directed outwards.
Towards the oppressors.
Towards the sources of oppression or the dominant system, yes. They are channeled right back onto the self.
Leading to?
Leading to devastating black-on-black violence. This self-destructive behavior, Dr. Wilson argues, is the white man's greatest protection against being destroyed by a black man.
The greatest protection.
Ensuring that the oppressor is left untouched and unscathed. This internal channeling of aggression is not presented as an accident or some inherent characteristic.
No.
It is presented as an implanted personality orientation. A deliberate psychological engineering serving the economic and political benefit of white folk by ensuring internal conflict rather than external resistance.
And within this system, the sources heavily critique the appointment of black judges, police commissioners. Even the black man is head of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs.
Yes, they do.
How does Dr. Wilson view these appointments? Because many might see them as progress or representation.
He views them as largely symbolic and ultimately counterproductive to genuine liberation.
Counterproductive? How?
The sources argue these symbolic appointments did not alleviate the community's suffering. Instead, they observed that the more black men filled America's prisons and black-on-black violence ravaged America's black ghettos during periods when such appointments became more common.
So things got worse, not better.
That's the observation presented, this assimilationist, moralist leadership establishment, as Dr. Wilson terms it, is criticized for believing that salvation lay in assimilating with other folk and working within the existing dominant structures.
Right, working within the system.
However, he contends that this approach ultimately serves to legitimize white power. By putting a black face on white power, giving the appearance of progress and equality without any fundamental change to the underlying power dynamics or the systemic oppression of the black community.
So it's a way for the system to absorb critique without actually changing.
That's the argument. It makes the system look inclusive while maintaining the status quo.
So what does all this mean for education then? It's often seen, as this universal path to liberation, upward mobility.
The great equalizer.
Yeah.
Right.
But the sources describe it very differently, as a meticulously designed tool within this grand scheme of dominance, one that actively suppresses rather than truly empowers.
It's a starkly different view.
How does Dr. Wilson frame the purpose of Eurocentric education for African people? #1. Eurocentric education for other people's problems.
Dr. Wilson presents Eurocentric education as fundamentally a system designed to maintain European socioeconomic, political, and cultural domination of the world.
You maintain domination.
For African people specifically, its primary function is described as education for servitude.
Education for servitude.
Yeah. It meticulously prepares individuals to solve other people's problems and make themselves useful to other folks. This pervasive jobs mentality.
The jobs mentality.
Where the goal of education is just to secure employment within existing structures, contrasts sharply with an ownership mentality.
Ownership mentality.
Which would prioritize creating, controlling, and owning productive enterprises for their own collective benefit.
I see.
The system, he argues, trains African people to be efficient, high-level employees rather than independent, self-determining agents.
And the sources provocatively state, the more educated we become, the more we participate in maintaining our subordination.
Yes, that's a key quote.
That's a very challenging claim.
Right.
Especially for those who see education as the path out of oppression. What does he mean by that? particularly for highly educated professionals.
He means that even highly educated African professionals, like those with MBAs or PhDs in economics, they are described as intellectual mercenaries.
Intellectual mercenary.
Their knowledge, though extensive and technically proficient, is tragically alienated,
Alienated knowledge.
meaning it can only work for the other people. It serves the interests of the dominant system or other groups, not the benefit of African communities.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. An African economist might work brilliantly on strategies to grow a multinational corporation,
Right.
but not on building sustainable, independent Black economic structures. Their skills aren't applied there.
Ah, okay.
This, Dr. Wilson argues, is why the more educated we become, the more we participate in maintaining our subordination. Their skills become valuable commodities.
Mhm.
But those commodities are deployed to strengthen the very system that oppresses their people, rather than being directed towards collective liberation and self-determination. Hashtag tag 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 2, dumbing down and suppressing critical thought. Dr. Wilson makes another stark observation. In a world where a minority, he estimates roughly 10% Europeans, rules over the vast majority, about 90% of the world's population,
Okay.
the dominated group must be kept out of its mind.
Kept out of its mind.
This deliberate dumbing down is presented as functionally necessary
Functionally necessary again.
and an economic political requirement to ensure African people remain subordinated.
Yeah.
Because if they were to fully develop their intellectual capacities, they would inevitably recognize the nature of their exploitation and work against it.
Right.
Therefore, this intellectual suppression ensures they work against their very best interest as a people.
And how does this dumbing down actually happen? The sources refer to controlling the domain of discourse and biasing information. Can you explain that mechanism?
Yeah, it's about controlling the very landscape of knowledge and thought.
Fine.
This system exerts powerful control over the domain of discourse, meaning what is considered important, what's worthy of learning, what even counts as news.
Controlling what's considered important.
It curates what information is presented and, crucially, how it's framed. This deliberate curation, Dr. Wilson argues, biases information and ultimately biases the very characteristics and capacities and abilities of our minds to operate on that information.
So it shapes how we think.
It actively suppresses the development of critical thinking, logical analysis, abstract reasoning, problem-solving skills, all essential for true self-determination.
Right.
This intellectual constriction leads to things like a short attention span and prevents the crucial hypothetical thinking.
Hypothetical think.
Yeah, the kind needed for long-term planning and effective resistance against oppression. If you can't think abstractly about a future different from your present, it's very hard to build one. Hashtag tag tag 3. Universities as instruments of military and economic dominance. Dr. Wilson takes a very controversial stance on major American and European universities.
Okay. How so?
He argues they are not merely academic institutions or job providers. They are, shockingly, presented as direct extensions of the military system.
Extensions of the military.
He claims that advanced weapons systems are researched and developed by university professors in university laboratories that literally are working for the government.
Wow.
The creation of advanced weaponry, from laser beam weapons to, he even suggests, germs such as AIDS, originates from these academic settings.
That's a huge claim.
It is. And it leads to his chilling conclusion that educated people are the most dangerous people in the world.
Why?
Because their knowledge is directly weaponized for global control and the maintenance of dominance.
This sounds like a complete reframing of the purpose of higher education.
Yeah.
If universities are viewed this way, what's the impact on African people and their place in the global economic structure?
Well, this education system, by its very design, further fosters that jobs mentality rather than an ownership mentality among African people.
Right, the servant mentality.
It trains them to become a valuable commodity or highly educated servants for the greater profit of white folk, fitting them neatly into the existing hierarchy.
All right.
Dr. Wilson points to the strategic reorganization of Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall, particularly with Eastern European nations hogging the trough of economic aid and becoming economically viable as a demonstration of a white-centric economic prioritization.
So resources flowed there.
He argues this further marginalizes African nations, showing that in the global economic architecture, African interests are secondary, if considered at all, to the strategic and economic advancement of European powers. Hashtag tag 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 44. The family as a manipulated social agent. Dr. Wilson extends his analysis even to the family unit itself, viewing it through this lens of systemic manipulation.
The family, too.
It's described not as a purely independent or natural unit, but as a product of a social political system
Okay.
that acts as a social agent. Its primary function, in this systemic view, is to create the kind of children a society needs to maintain its integrity.
Create the children society needs.
This implies that even implicitly, the family unit is geared towards perpetuating the dominant social order and producing individuals who fit within its established roles.
So if society needs a certain type of child to maintain its structure, the Black family could be manipulated into creating that outcome. That's a stark idea.
Precisely. For example, Dr. Wilson argues that if a dominant society needs inept children to maintain its power structures and a subordinated labor force, the Black family, despite its best intentions and desires for its children's success, will be unwillingly manipulated into creating that ineptness.
Unwillingly manipulated.
This isn't presented as being about parental failure, right? It's about systemic pressure and psychological engineering.
Right.
Even when Black parents diligently teach their children to read and write, the sources provocatively ask for to what end?
First set in.
If that education ultimately serves to solve other people's problems and reinforces, rather than challenges, their subordinate position within the dominant system.
So the question becomes, who does the education serve?
Exactly. Is the education genuinely empowering the child to serve their own group's collective interests, or is it just preparing them to be a functional component of an external system? The sources argue that the religion handed down by masters is a central pillar of psychological warfare against African people.
Psychological warfare through religion.
It is specifically designed, he claims, to perpetuate a slave consciousness.
Slave consciousness.
That fosters self-defeating behaviors and fundamentally undermines any true pursuit of collective liberation. It's presented as a spiritual tool of control.
There's a paralyzing contradiction at play within this imposed religious framework, according to Dr. Wilson.
Yes.
Where sentiments like the love of money is the root of all evil are deeply instilled.
Yeah.
How does he see this impacting African people's ability to achieve collective power?
Well, this creates a profound and paralyzing contradiction.
How so?
While other groups might see wealth accumulation as a virtue or a necessity for group power, this ideology can lead to a craziness of seeing poorness and goodness as the same thing and seeing virtue and poverty within the African community.
Seeing virtue in poverty.
Which actively prevents the vigorous and necessary pursuit of collective wealth. Wealth which is essential for group survival and advancement.
So it disarms them economically.
It subtly equates self-dispossession and material deprivation with spiritual virtue, disarming a people from pursuing the very economic power needed for their liberation. It's a powerful internal block, is the argument. And this slave religion, Dr. Wilson argues, leads to destructive outcomes.
Like what?
Where prayers and religious practices do not lead to collective advancement or tangible improvement in the material conditions of African people.
Good.
He critiques the example of Nelson Mandela, lauded by some for telling South Africans to forget the past and not redistribute wealth from white oppressors.
Right.
Sharply critiquing this as confusing forgiveness with justice.
Forgiveness versus justice.
The core message is that if religion ends up with sons in the jails of America and ends up maintaining African people in slavery, then something is fundamentally wrong with its application and underlying message for the oppressed.
So if it maintains subjugation, it's not liberation.
It suggests that a religion that serves to maintain subjugation is not a path to true spiritual or material freedom. That's the perspective offered.
Okay. We've explored how Dr. Wilson sees power operating on so many levels. Economic, psychological.
It's pervasive.
And how deeply entrenched these systems of control are. But this deep dive isn't just about identifying problems, is it?
No, definitely not.
What does Dr. Wilson propose as a way forward? The sources present a pretty radical call to action for self-determination and liberation.
It is radical.
One that requires a fundamental shift in perspective and collective behavior. #A. Shifting from individualism to collective nationhood.
The strategic recommendation here is a radical reorientation away from the prevailing integrationist approach.
Away from integration.
Yes. The sources vehemently argue against integrating and merging with our enemies.
Enemies.
Quite pointedly questioning the very motives of wanting to merge with the world's greatest criminals and thieves. That's the language used.
Wow. Okay. So what's the alternative?
Instead, Dr. Wilson advocates that African Americans must embrace a powerful sense of nation or group consciousness
A sense of nation?
and organize themselves as a nation within a nation.
A nation within a nation. What does that mean practically?
It's not just a metaphor for solidarity. It's presented as a blueprint for strategic collective action and self-preservation in what he describes as a hostile environment. It's about building an internal, cohesive power block.
It sounds like this group consciousness is absolutely foundational then.
It
Without a shared identity and a robust sense of collective purpose, African Americans remain, as he puts it, isolated bits and pieces, fragmented and unable to cooperate effectively to solve their profound problems or defend their shared interests.
What does Dr. Wilson emphasize about the power that comes from this kind of collective thinking?
He emphasizes that many of the individual things we desire can only be achieved through group activity,
Individual desires need group activity.
meaning personal aspirations, whether for safety, prosperity, even cultural expression, are inextricably linked to the collective strength and organization of the group.
Okay.
This stands in stark contrast to the prevalent ideology of individualism.
Right. Which, he argues, hinders coordinated group efforts among African people.
Unlike other groups.
He points out that other ethnic groups consistently operate with a group consciousness to protect and advance their collective interests, sometimes at the expense of others, and that this is a fundamental, pragmatic approach to power in a multi-group society. Without it, African people remain vulnerable and easily exploited. Dr. Wilson also offers a profound critique of the current definition of Black manhood,
Okay.
which he argues is often rooted superficially in consumption.
Consumption, like what?
Things like the kind of cars they drive, the clothes they wear, or even sometimes the performance of violence within their own communities.
Right.
He proposes a revolutionary redefinition.
Which is?
The title of man should not be conferred until one has proved that you can produce for your people
Produce for your people.
and is a nurturing aspect of their people.
Wow. Linking manhood to production and nurturing.
It's a call to align individual identity with collective responsibility and tangible productivity, shifting value from what one consumes to what one contributes to the group.
So this shift is about moving away from a mentality where men, as he says, suck the blood of their people,
Yes.
to one of genuine and tangible contribution. It redefines self-worth and purpose.
Exactly. It's
Huh.
about redefining manhood in terms of the creation of the things that they wear and being the manufacturer of the clothes they wear, not just the consumer.
Okay.
This proactive approach aims to counter behaviors like selling drugs to children or otherwise harming the community, which paradoxically direct wealth and resources to external groups that benefit from their subjugation, while simultaneously weakening the community from within. It's a call to turn one's energy and efforts inward for collective strength, making men the producers and protectors of their community's well-being and future. #BB, controlling internal markets and reinvesting wealth. A cornerstone of liberation, according to Dr. Wilson, is for the African-American nation to strategically capture our own internal resources.
Capture internal resources.
And gain control of our own internal markets.
Control their own markets. Why is that so crucial?
This directly counters the massive wealth drain to other ethnic groups that we discussed.
Right, siphoning off.
And redirects economic power inward for the benefit and development of the community. This isn't just presented as an economic strategy, it's a political act of self-determination.
So, if they are to gain control of these internal markets, how would that translate into real, substantial power? How can their existing immense buying power be leveraged?
Dr. Wilson argues that by coordinating even a fraction of their immense buying power.
It's a fraction.
Yeah. For example, channeling just 10 cents out of every consumer dollar,
Right.
African Americans could generate billions for Black businesses,
Billions.
multiply wealth within their communities, and gain real and substantial power in America.
And this isn't just theory.
No. He points to historical consumer movements where Blacks refused to spend their money in particular ways and in particular places.
Like boycotts.
Yeah, and by withdrawing their consumption, they were able to change the South before a single law was passed, demonstrating the immense power of coordinated economic action as a lever for social and political change.
So it's about conscious strategic deployment of collective resources.
That's the core idea. #2. building independent economic institutions. And this means actively establishing and controlling Black-owned businesses, banks, financial institutions.
Their own institutions.
Because the current system, according to Wilson, often means Black money is unwittingly used to finance your enemies by circulating it through external systems.
Right.
He outlines a clear progression for economic empowerment.
Okay, what's a progression?
From gaining control of internal markets and consumer spending to developing wholesale capabilities, then moving into manufacturing, and eventually even buying equity in white and multinational corporations.
Buying equity? Why?
To gain influence and redirect their operations for collective benefit, it's presented as a systematic approach to economic sovereignty.
And it's crucial here to redefine wealth beyond mere income. Right.
Absolutely.
True wealth, the source's stress, is about ownership of productive facilities and their ownership of property and the control of major institutions, not just high salary.
Exactly. Dr. Wilson points out that a high-income earner, if they lack ownership and control over the means of production for major institutions, can be broke as the man on the street if their job is lost.
High income doesn't equal wealth then.
It highlights the illusion of security without foundational economic power. True wealth, in his view, is collective and structural.
Collective and structural.
It's the ability of a group to control its own economic destiny, to produce for its own needs, and to keep its wealth circulating within its own community rather than having it siphoned off by external forces.
It's about self-sufficiency and communal economic power.
Not just individual high salaries that can vanish at any moment. That's the distinction he makes. #C African-centered education for liberation and problem solving.
Okay, so this isn't just about changing economic habits. It seems like it's about a complete and radical re-education too.
And it has to be.
Dr. Wilson asserts that education must be profoundly reoriented to cultivate an African-centered consciousness for power and survival, fundamentally different from the Eurocentric model we discussed earlier.
The primary function of education for a dominated people, Dr. Wilson argues, must shift dramatically.
Shift from what to what?
From mere job acquisition to securing their survival, liberation, and advancement.
Okay.
This means taking the power of definition away from Europeans.
Taking back the power to define.
And defining reality, intelligence, even identity on their own terms. True intelligence, in this African-centered framework, is defined as the ability to solve problems that confront the African people.
Solving their problems.
Not just scoring high on standardized IQ tests or efficiently solving other people's problems that serve external interests. It's intelligence in service of collective self-preservation and progress.
So this redefinition offers a stark contrast to how intelligence is often perceived. Really shifts the focus from individual academic achievement to pragmatic, collective problem solving.
It does. Dr. Wilson provides a compelling example.
What's that?
An individual who makes his thousands per month, but still didn't know how to legitimize the money.
Legitimize it, meaning?
Meaning how to convert it into lasting wealth or leverage it for collective gain, is in his framework just as stupid as a black middle-class sir who takes that little check and takes every ounce of that check and spends it giving it to a white man to pay and play the rent.
Wow. So intelligence is about application for the group.
It's about applying knowledge to African circumstances. This means focusing on practical skills like how to organize money for Black business growth, how to collectively invest, or how to control the importation and distribution of African products.
Right.
Rather than simply participating in external systems as a consumer or a high-level employee without true ownership, it's about intelligence that serves the group's direct needs. #2. Cultivating strategic and hypothetical thinking. And to achieve this kind of collective problem solving, education must actively foster critical thinking, analytical skills, and hypothetical reasoning.
Hypothetical reasoning again.
To enable proactive, rather than merely reactionary, problem solving. This means developing abstract thinking.
Abstract thinking.
The ability to project into the distant future and organize current behavior, social relations, and institutions in terms of that anticipated future.
Planning for the long term.
This foresight is crucial for anticipating threats, identifying opportunities, and designing long-term solutions that might take generations to bear fruit.
This sounds like a fundamental shift from a short-term reactive mindset to a long-term strategic one, almost like a military strategist thinking.
Exactly. This allows for a robust, proactive defense. Dr. Wilson states the mindset should be, I'm not worried about whether they continue to do it, whether they're conspiring to do it. All I know is that they're capable of doing it.
Focus on capability, not just intent.
Yes. This shifts the focus from proving malice to simply acknowledging capability and therefore prioritizing preparedness.
Okay.
Preparedness itself can deter attacks, he suggests. As with concerns about germ warfare or laser beam weapons, it fundamentally shifts the mindset from reactive fear to proactive strategic readiness. Recognizing that power means being prepared for anything. #tag 3. Establishing independent educational and research institutions. Building on that, the sources strongly advocate for developing African-centered universities and research institutions,
Independent ones.
entirely independent of existing dominant structures. The purpose of these institutions would be to specifically conduct research to solve Black problems.
Like,
For example, investigating and combating diseases like AIDS from an African-centered perspective, perhaps seeking indigenous solutions or understanding their disproportionate impact within the community,
right.
and to advance African technological and military defense capabilities. These institutions would be truly self-serving, generating knowledge and innovation for the benefit of African people worldwide.
So the goal isn't just to participate in existing universities, but to create an entirely parallel and self-sufficient knowledge infrastructure.
That's precisely it. This is presented as crucial for securing the survival of African people in a world that often operates against their interests.
Okay.
The goal is to establish African world infosystems, to write all of the books that are being read in the Black Studies programs globally,
Write their own book.
to crowd out any other point of view in universities by offering a dominant African perspective, and to educate professors who will actively advance African interests and perspectives.
Ensuring self-determination and knowledge production.
Exactly. Taking intellectual and cultural sovereignty into their own hands. #tag 4. The family as a manipulated social agent. Revisit. And building on what we discussed earlier about the family as a social agent,
Right.
Dr. Wilson emphasizes that this re-education must extend to how families are consciously structured and operate. The family remains a product of a social-political system whose primary function is to create the kind of children a society needs to maintain its integrity. For African people, this means reorienting the family's purpose.
So if previously the Black family was unwillingly manipulated into creating ineptness, as the sources put it, this new approach would aim to deliberately cultivate children who are equipped for collective liberation.
Precisely. The goal becomes to consciously instill the opposite. Instead of producing children who serve other people's problems, the family must become a conscious agent for producing children equipped with group consciousness, an ownership mentality, critical thinking, and a dedication to solving African problems. Even when Black parents diligently teach their children to read and write, the sources provocatively ask again, for what to what end?
Right.
If that education ultimately serves to solve other people's problems, the call to action for the family is to ensure that every aspect of a child's upbringing, from values to education, is geared towards empowering them to contribute directly to African self-determination and liberation.
Rather than feeding into the dominant system.
Exactly. #tag embracing real power beyond symbolic gestures.
Ultimately, this deep dive really shows that power, in this view, is not just a concept. It's an indispensable means for survival.
Absolutely essential.
Dr. Wilson emphasizes that for African people, this is a question of life and death, not merely abstract rights or moral appeals. It's about confronting reality head-on. #tag 1. Power is the essence of survival.
Dr. Wilson directly challenges the notion that power is sinful,
Power is sinful.
dismissing it as a false value deliberately instilled to maintain African powerlessness.
Another manipulation.
He asserts that power is necessary to all living things. It is the essence of life. Conversely, powerlessness, in his view, leads directly to corruption and self-destruction within the community,
Because it lacks the means to protect itself.
or pursue its interests. The sources explicitly state a profound reciprocal relationship. The European cannot be what he is unless we are what we are,
Needing.
implying that African subjugation is not an unfortunate byproduct, but functionally vital for European dominance and existence in its current form. It's presented as a zero-sum game of power. #tag 2, willingness to use coercive force for defense.
And this understanding of power extends to the willingness to use coercive force, if necessary, for defense. That's a very blunt and perhaps uncomfortable truth for many.
It is a blunt truth that Dr. Wilson confronts directly. True power, according to his framework, involves the willingness to fully and effectively use all available resources,
All resources.
including potentially threatening their enemies and engaging in war to the death if necessary to achieve and defend group interests.
War to the death.
This includes recognizing that war is a pretty name for robbing a thief, deconstructing the romanticized or sanitized view of conflict to reveal its core function, the forceful redistribution of resources and power.
Okay.
The sources warn that laws on the books and moral appeals are utterly insufficient
Why?
because laws are only as strong as those who enforce it, and those in power will inevitably prioritize their own survival and interests above all else.
So power isn't given, it's taken.
It's taken and defended. That's the pragmatic view emphasized here. This understanding of power translates into a specific call for strategic political engagement.
How so?
The call is to shoot for the control of the American government
Control the government.
and advocate for a black party at independence.
A black independent party.
An independent political force unconstrained by existing party loyalties, capable of dictating terms and influencing policy directly, rather than relying on existing parties that, from Dr. Wilson's perspective, may not truly represent or advance African interests.
So it's a fundamental shift from just participating to actually seeking power over the system.
That's the call.
So this means rejecting concepts like multiculturalism and colorblindness as weaknesses, right?
Yes.
And instead, embracing a strong race-conscious and Afrocentric identity to assume group interests.
Yes. Dr. Wilson argues that multiculturalism and colorblindness are presented as weaknesses that allow for continued exploitation because they dissolve the collective identity necessary for group action.
Okay.
Instead, African people must be race-conscious and Afrocentric to effectively assert their group interests and achieve real power.
Real power meaning.
The kind of power that can actually prevent those who would wish to destroy us from doing so.
Yeah.
It's about developing an unapologetic, self-aware group identity as the foundation for collective political and economic action. Not for isolation, he clarifies, but for self-preservation and liberation within a world he describes as inherently structured by racial power dynamics. #outro.
Wow. Okay. We've taken a really deep dive into Dr. Amos Wilson's powerful and often provocative insights today,
Definitely provocative.
examining how systemic European dominance and manipulation, as he frames it, permeates economic, social, and psychological spheres,
Yeah.
from the hidden profitability of inner-city markets to the deliberate shaping of consciousness and education for servitude.
Yeah.
It's clear that the sources argue nothing is accidental.
No, every aspect of current conditions is presented as serving a function within the existing power structure.
Right.
The profound takeaway is that many challenges faced by African people are, in Dr. Wilson's analysis, functionally necessary for maintaining existing power structures.
Functionally necessary. That phrase keeps coming back.
But, importantly, the sources also offer a comprehensive blueprint for liberation through collective action.
Right, the call to action.
Embracing a nation consciousness, controlling internal markets, building independent institutions, and fundamentally redefining education and power itself to serve the group's survival and advancement.
This deep dive truly challenges us to consider what it genuinely means to be empowered, especially in a world where power is so often defined by those who hold it,
It does.
and how one might reclaim agency within such a framework.
Absolutely. And it raises an important question for you, the listener, to maybe reflect on.
Okay.
If, as Dr. Wilson contends, the human mind is socially manufactured and essentially ideological,
Yeah.
how might you actively exercise the implanted spirit of alien values, as he puts it,
Exercise the spirit.
and begin the profound process of reclaiming an authentic, self-determined consciousness for yourself and perhaps for your community, moving beyond merely reacting to the world to actively shaping it?